When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
All right, hello YouTube. Welcome back to the Grease Comedy YouTube channel. Today's video, we are going to be doing everyone's favorite POV, Bran. And actually, we're getting to some of the better Bran POVs. We're going to be doing Bran 5. Now, I think by far, probably Bran's best chapter. Again, just a refresher, as we haven't talked about Bran in a little while. The last time we kind of talked about Bran, it was a lot about his relationship with Robb, kind of his loneliness, how he feels like he's not being listened to, how he's kind of a burden. And this chapter is going to really use a lot of that emotion in Robb's relationship with Bran and vice versa. And that's going to be the focal point of this chapter, and adding in a little bit of action and some other things going on here as Bran is going to go out on his first ride outside of Winterfell. Now, I want to say before we actually get into the actual chapter, just want to say, I don't give you guys enough of my appreciation sometimes, so I appreciate you guys. And you guys have been extremely nice the last week or two, giving me some very kind comments and such. And I just want to say I appreciate you guys that, watch these videos, especially the rereads, just because I know they are my lowest performing series. But I enjoy doing them, and I know a lot of you guys do enjoy them. You guys leave that in the comments a decent amount on these videos specifically. So I wanted to give a shout out to you guys. You guys truly do make my day when you do those comments. And so, yeah, so let's get into it. We're going to be starting on page 396. So we're going to be getting into the 400s in this chapter. But let's begin. So the chapter opens with Robb and Bran about to exit Winterfell's gate. A light snow is falling, and Bran is trying to keep calm as his heart was beating fast. Again, a lot of things going on in Bran's mind, right? Excitement over being able to ride again, going outside of Winterfell, going into the Wolf's Wood again. It's been a very long time, but also some anxiety. What if he falls? What if, he does any of these things? He'll never be able to ride. They'll never allow him to do this again. If this saddle doesn't actually work well enough, Bran is never going to be able to do this again. So a lot of feelings going on for Bran, as well as this is his first time outside of Winterfell since his fall. Robb asks if he is ready, and Bran says that he is, and tells his horse, named Dancer, to go and touch her neck lightly. Now, Bran notes that he has only ridden this horse in the yard, and that this horse is only 2 years old, which again kind of builds on the point that Tyrion was talking about. You need a young, smart horse. And so Bran also notes that this horse is smarter than it ought to be. So again, you have a great horse for Bran, as it is going to be programmed to his commands and things like that, different than how a normal horse is used. Even the saddle that Tyrion had provided, which was very big and awkward, seemed to work the trick as Bran sat the horse. At first, he had been guided around the horse or around the yard by people like Hodor and such, but each time he grew bolder. He got more confident as he was repeatedly doing this, until he was very confident with riding. And so again, just to point out, this isn't Bran's first time in this saddle going out past Winterfell. It's just now that you're not in a controlled environment anymore. Whereas you were just in the yard, you were kind of in a safe environment. Now you're going out out into the wood. Yes, it's not very far from Winterfell, but still, it's a different experience. That'll get us into page 397. So moving into page 397, they passed beneath the gatehouse, through the portcullis, and past the outer walls, accompanied by the two wolves, Summer and Grey Wind, Theon with his longbow, who is looking to shoot a deer, and 4 guardsmen. And also Joseph, the new master of horse, very odd name, and Lewin riding on a donkey. Bran had wanted to go with just Robb, again showing that Bran understands that Robb is a completely different person when he's on his own, right? Robb is more like the brother to Bran, and when Robb is with all of these other people, he has to act the Lord. Again, Robb the Lord, as this title, as the chapter of this title is named after. And it's also just a nice kind of just drawback to, or a reminder, I guess, from the last chapter, and how that bond between the two have just really strengthened. Something we did not see in the show at all, which is I think a really big missed opportunity from the first season. Now, Hal, Malin, and Lewin would not hear it and argued that if he fell, he would need at least Lewin there, which again, I think is sensible. It's just unfortunate. It's right. It's the idea that highborns, a lot of times you're really not allowed to be, by yourselves. And I know as a lord, you can order people around to not do so, to, leave you alone, but it just doesn't really happen that often. They then pass through Wintertown, which is, as of right now, seemed deserted, with maybe a fifth of it populated. But old Nan and Lewin had told Bran that winter was coming soon, and the time when the farmers would leave their frozen fields was approaching. Again, just the idea here that Wintertown is this place where people go to take shelter during the winter, and they have a better chance of survival. A few of the villagers seemed anxious with the wolves, one man even dropping his wood out of fear, but most of them had grown accustomed to the wolves, and just bent the knee as they went past, to which Robb nodded to them in acknowledgement. So, again, as we, we'll learn later in this chapter, we're not actually really given a good description of the direwolves at this point, but the direwolves already we're only about halfway through the first book, a little over halfway. The direwolves are bigger than any average wolf in Westeros, so they make a very frightening sight. And Bran notes that at first the sway in his saddle seemed very awkward, but as they went, it grew more natural, and he began to feel more comfortable, and his anxiety fled. And he could not help but smile. Again, looking at from Bran's point of view, he's always someone that, after his fall, is watching other people. He's not able to perform any actions, really. He's confined to Winterfell. So being able to ride a horse, being able to travel, all of these things is very gratifying for someone like Bran. And that gets us into page 398. As they continued, they came upon the local inn, the Smoking Log, to which two women were at. And Theon calls out to the younger one that we find out is named Kyra, who went red and covered her face. Again, giving us this idea that Theon is a very lusty person, that he again likes his women, again pointing to just character traits for Theon that we're building in this chapter. This is another good chapter for Theon, where I think we don't really up to this point have a lot about Theon. We really don't, we haven't seen much of him outside of a couple things here and there, so this chapter is at least going to give us a bit more about him. But Theon then turns to Robb, asking if he had told him about the night with her and Bessa and how she squirms in bed. And Robb again just cuts Theon off. It's like, really, Theon? Bran is right there. He does not need to be hearing or learning about your sexual experiences. And that's exactly what Robb says, cutting him off, saying not in front of Bran. Now, the biggest challenge Robb has, and I think this is something that as an older brother is a real big struggle, because these things should not actually have been left on Robb's shoulders, of how much can he tell Bran? Bran is not that old, right? He's not a man yet. What does Robb allow to be said in Bran's presence? How much does Robb tell him about what's going on in the world, right? Ned's injury, Catelyn taking Tyrion. How much should Robb be telling that to Bran? And Bran pretended not to have heard anything, but he notes he had never gotten close to Theon, his father's ward. Theon seemed to always be smiling, and that he knew a secret that the world did not. And again, it just kind of gives you that vibe that Theon is just kind of this arrogant guy who can't take really anything seriously. But something I want to note here is that we now have another Stark that has never really gotten close to Theon, and it really feels like no one in the Stark household has gotten close to Theon outside of Robb up to this point. So it's very interesting the way that, because Robb and Theon are of a similar age, they actually grow pretty close together. But then someone like Jon and Theon have a really bad relationship. And that just becomes of Theon kind of believes that he is of a higher social standard than Jon, because Jon's a bastard, even though Theon is basically a captive here. So it's just a nice little interesting dynamic between a lot of the Starks and Theon. Robb then reins up next to Bran, saying he is doing good, but Bran says he wants to go faster, and so they do. Robb gets a decent ways ahead, but making sure not to lose them. Eventually, Bran catches up to him, but they have gotten well ahead and out of sight of the others. Again, remember, Lewin is on a donkey, and so the guards just straight up can't leave Lewin, and this is going to become a problem later on that Robb doesn't really have that insight of. It's like, you can't really just go wandering off, not having your guards, and just abandoning Lewin all the way in the back. So it's something that's going to come up later when we see the wildlings and the deserters attack Bran. But it's just something interesting to note as of right now. Now, one thing you could point in Robb's defense, you really wouldn't suspect like any like criminals or wildlings in the Wolf's Wood. It's like, it's pretty decent ways away from the wall. And also, if you're a wildling or deserter, this would kind of be like the last place you would think to go to because you're so close to Winterfell. But yeah, I think it's an interesting point if you want to look at maybe the defense of Robb. Robb then jokes saying he would ask to race him, but he fears that Bran would win. But Bran notes that something is troubling him. Again, Robb has gotten all of the reports of what's happened in King's Landing, and so there's a lot of pressure mounting on Robb's shoulders, as he is the person in charge as of right now. Bran asks if he had heard Summer howling last night, and Robb says that Greywind was also restless. Bran notes how much older he looks than 15. Robb has grown a little bit of stubble, some facial hair, but Robb continues stating sometimes he thinks the wolves know something. Again, we see the wolves acting not normal. And why has this happened? Well, think about it. There's a lot of things in crisis right now for the Starks. Ned's injury, Catelyn's not really getting the aid that she hoped for in the Vale. A lot's not going well for the Starks right now. And the wolves seem to know this or have some sort of connection to their family being in trouble. And that's something interesting to ponder as well. Because even like Nymeria, right, when she gets separated from Arya, she seems to know to go after a lot of these Freys, these people that went against the Starks. It's a very interesting dynamic to think about. How much do the wolves actually know? Like, how tied in are they with the Starks? That'll get us into page 399. So, getting into page 399, Robb then continues saying, again, I brought this up earlier, but sometimes he doesn't know how much he should tell Bran, and I think that's a really normal thing, because Robb at this point now is kind of having to be kind of a parent figure for Bran, even though the two still share like this brotherly relationship. Think about it. Catelyn's not there anymore. Ned is not here. I mean, he is kind of the person that has to look after Bran. Not kind of, he is. And Bran fires back, saying he's 8. That is not so far from 15. And it actually is quite a bit away. Bran has not even come close to coming to like a manhood. Even Robb, who it's like, he's still 15. He's still so young. But Robb is at least at a point where he's able to grow up. And I think Bran is, we see such a common theme with younger characters in George R.R. Martin's world. And that's because it reflects real life. When you're younger, especially I think teenage years, especially around Robb's age, and you think you know everything. You think that you're an adult now. You can take all these things, and you can't. It's something that we have to mature and grow up, and our brains fully develop, and we start looking back on things much differently. I'm someone that I relate to this quite a lot, because I think when I was in my high school years, so again, 15 to the 18 range, even 19, 20, I feel like I thought I knew so much more about what I should be doing, what was right, or things like that. And now I look back on that and I think I was very foolish. So I think it's a really interesting point that George R.R. Martin always brings up with all these characters like Dany, like Robb, like Jon, Sansa, Arya, even Bran in this moment, that is really human. He also continues by saying that he is the heir to Winterfell after Robb, which is an interesting point to bring up because we know Robb is actually going to die. So right now in the current story, Bran is the actual heir to Winterfell. So just a nice little moment to bring up. But Robb, with a bit of sadness in him, says, "So you are," and that Lewin had awoken him last night, and there was a raven. And you can tell how much this news is kind of taking a toll on Robb. Not only because you think about the injury that happened with Ned and how, again, the dangerous position that Ned is in King's Landing, but also like someone like Jory dying. And this is something that's another going to be a huge point of this chapter with Robb and Bran, is Jory's death is much more impactful. Jory was someone that he wasn't like a family member to them, but he was someone that kind of seemed like, what if, for instance, let's just say, you know, your best friend in real life, and, you know, you have a decent relationship with, say, their parents. That's kind of what this feels like. It feels like this was an adult figure that was with them, you know, a lot growing up. But instantly, Bran notes this is bad, as he remembers old Nan's line, dark wings and dark words. Lately, that has been coming true. Again, think about all of the things that have been happening, right? Robb has written to the Lord Commander. He has gotten a letter back saying Benjen's still missing. Catelyn and the stuff going on with Tyrion, not good. I mean, if you're Robb and you understand this, it's not good. And also you have Cat writing to Robb, telling him to prepare the North and all of these things that Ned had told her to do, which she's the one that should have done them, not putting them on Robb. But, you know, whatever. We won't harp on Catelyn's mistakes as of right now. The stuff going on in King's Landing, there's a lot of things going negative or pointing towards war at this moment. And I think something that you really have to consider is, let's think about this from Bran's last POV chapter. Bran is having all this happiness and excitement of being able to go out past Winterfell because of Tyrion. And now his mother has captured that same person. And so when you're looking at this in Bran's mind, you're going, it couldn't have been Tyrion that had a hand in, you know, attacking me or something, because he actively wanted to help me. And Tyrion didn't really seem like that bad of a guy either. As we're going to talk about here in a second, because there's a really interesting part of this that Bran is not remembering. Again, he thinks there's something he should be remembering with the Lannister name, but he can't remember what. And it makes him kind of queasy when he thinks about it. And this is something that's really interesting, is because we really see that, in my opinion, right? I believe that Bloodraven took that memory out of Bran's head. I think there was an agenda there, because if that memory happens and Bran wakes up and he knows who did it, well, now there's not as likely of a chance of there ever being a situation where Bran goes north of the wall and goes to the cave. So that's a memory that Bloodraven specifically would not want in Bran's head. We talked about that kind of in Bran's 3, that whole dream chapter. But yeah, I thought that was something really interesting to note in this chapter. What Bran has been noticing, though, is that right after this, riders were sent out with Robb's commands. And Bran had heard talks of Moat Cailin, the ancient stronghold of the first men that had been built at the top of the neck. Whatever was happening was not good. Even Bran saw that. Again, even Bran, who's this young 8-year-old kid, understands if you're sending, you know, soldiers or riders to Moat Cailin, the main defense of the North, something's up. And when you have all of these messages that aren't looking good, you put all the pieces together. And Bran had hoped that this letter was about his mother, that his mother was returning, and he was not. And it was not. He was disappointed to learn that it was from Alan in King's Landing, informing them that Jory and the others had been killed by the Kingslayer. Bran was taken aback. He did not know what to say. Jory had been captain of the guard longer than he had been born. He remembered all of the times of him chasing him on the rooftops. Again, this is the first time for a character like Bran and Robb that they are really experiencing loss. And everyone kind of is going to react to that differently. I'm going to talk about this a lot with, I think, Sansa and Arya and a lot of the Stark children as we go forward after Ned's death. And even Catelyn, right, with Bran and Rickon's supposed deaths as well later on. But this is something that's going to be difficult to take, especially for Bran, who's 8. And yes, you could be thinking, okay, well, Benjen technically, you know, he's presumed dead, but the Stark children don't believe that. This is a confirmed death. We know Jory is dead. So it'll be interesting to see like how our characters deal with that in the future. And that will get us into page 400. So into the 400s, Bran asks why anyone would want to kill Jory. And Robb has no answer. But that was not the worst of it. Ned had taken an injury with his horse falling on his leg. He was being treated by Pycelle, but no one knew when he would wake. Again, building this uncertainty that Ned could die, right? He's not awoken. He's not up and moving around. If that was to happen, Robb becomes the Lord of Winterfell, the Warden of the North, presumably. That's a lot of pressure that Robb did not expect to have at the age of 15. As the others are approaching, Robb puts his hand on the pommel of his sword. Again, this has been a constant reoccurring theme in this book so much. It's younger characters always, making these oaths or doing things while grabbing their sword and having their sword out when there's no reason to. It shows their youth, shows how young these characters are. And Robb has been guilty of this not once, but a couple times now. So, yeah. He tells Bran that no matter what, this will not be forgotten. This made Bran even more fearful, again, threatening the idea of Bran doing some sort of revenge or violence that could pull him south in a war, which is exactly what ends up happening. But he asks, what will he do? And Robb responds, as Theon is pulling up, that Theon says they should call the banners blood for blood. And that is a big move, right? Because calling the banners is now, okay, we're going to war. And that's a big thing to do, especially when you look at Robb doesn't have all of the facts. He knows that some sort of incident happened between Ned and Jaime, but he doesn't know why. He doesn't know what the context was. Maybe he can put it together that it was retaliation from Catelyn taking Tyrion. And that's the thing is, like, when you get into the idea of, okay, blood for blood, that's kind of what Jaime was doing. Catelyn kind of made the first move. It wasn't Jaime that makes the first move, it was Catelyn. And Ned is paying the price for Catelyn's errors. And for once, Theon did not smile, which is interesting. We've seen Theon smiling at everything, making a joke of everything. Even when kicking Garrett's head in the first chapter with Bran, like kicking the head after he's been killed, Theon's not smiling here. He understands how big of a deal this is. Bran then notes that only the Lord can call the banners, to which Theon says if Ned dies, Robb is the Lord. Which is, Theon in this moment isn't wrong, right? Like, they should be preparing for the worst. If Ned is going to die to this injury, Robb needs to prepare. Robb needs to know what he's going to do given that situation happening. But Bran yells that he will not die. Again, similar to the way Jon and Robb say that Benjen is not dead. Robb agrees, but he notes that the responsibility and honor of the North is in his hands, and that when Ned had left, he had told him to be strong for Bran and Rickon. Again, he continues saying he is almost a man grown now. Again, constant ideas of characters trying to be this man already before maybe they're even ready for it. And I think it's interesting when you take a look at the idea of defending the honor and the responsibility of the North is in his hands. But the question is, does Robb know what that even means, really, at this point? I talked about it already. Like, should Robb be going to war over this? Like, if Ned died here, is this the call for the Starks to go to war? I don't know, because it's really Catelyn who starts the war, not Ned, or not Jaime. So I don't know. That's an interesting point. I think they would have to, just based upon, defending that their lord was killed and all that. But it is interesting the way we see that this is more of a personal war. Like, this has nothing really to do with a lot of the other northern houses, but interesting idea here. Bran notes how he wishes Mother was back and looks for Luwin, who he sees in the very far distance. Again, playing on the idea that guards kind of have to wait for Luwin because he's all the way in the back, riding a donkey. But he asks, does Luwin support calling the banners? Theon says he is as timid as an old woman, and Bran fires back saying father and mother always listen to him. To which Robb says he listens to everyone. The joy that Bran had felt at the beginning of the ride was gone. That'll get us into page 401, but again, just building up this tension, like what is Robb going to do? And I want to kind of play devil's advocate and look at this from Luwin's point of view. Calling the banners is something that all but is going to secure war. Again, it's fine to maybe make plans, but when you do that, you're building up the Cold War. And that's kind of the issue here, is like, if you're going to call the banners, you should know what you're going to do. Not call the banners to try and figure out what you're going to do. When you're calling those banners, you should already know. You don't want to get all these lords coming to Winterfell, bringing all their men, all of these things, and then just tell them, I'm not sure what we're going to do. We're just going to kind of prepare. That's not what they're going to want to hear, and they're going to feel like you wasted their time. And also, Robb is extremely young. So they're also not gonna think that highly of him, as we see end up happening. So I think Luwin sees all of this. I think Luwin sees the writing on the wall and probably is waiting for Catelyn to get back for Robb to really make any big decision here. But that'll get us into page 401. And again, the thought of Robb going to war is something that fills Bran with dread. Whereas once maybe it would have filled him with excitement of this new journey, this tale, again, really giving off the vibes of like Sansa, but now his family is more or less gone. Catelyn and Ned have left. Sansa and Arya have left as well. Jon is gone. Benjen is missing. It's just Robb and Rickon right now. And so that's something that it shows a little bit of growth from Bran already. Bran then asks if they can go back now, to which Robb notes they must find the wolves, and Luwin had wanted to keep the ride short in case of saddle sores. And Bran was kind of sick of it. Bran is this character now he's so sick of everybody worrying about him, constantly making sure he's okay. He feels like a burden. And I think that's something that in Bran's situation, I think everybody would feel like you're burdening everyone around you because you can't do anything really by yourself. And I think this horse ride is something that allows Bran to be a little bit more independent. You know, he can do things. He doesn't need people constantly around him. Bran and Robb then leave the road to go find the wolves, with Theon a bit behind. Bran enjoyed being under the trees again, as he had not been back in so long. And yes, he did know the forest, but he hadn't, again, remembered all the smells and the things that felt so new to him. Robb and Bran were easily outpacing the others, even Theon, when they reached a stream. And this gets Bran to start to tear up. He starts to remember a moment when Jory had taken them fishing with Jon as well. And it just kind of brings back all these memories that Jory is kind of finally gone. There's also a really nice moment that I think really shows who Jon is as a person. Because Bran had caught nothing, but Jon had caught a fish and actually given the fish to Bran. Which again shows how Jon is someone that put others before himself, and he was very caring. And he wanted to kind of make this Robb and Bran kind of look good. It really shows a lot of who Jon is. Bran asks if they will ever see Jon again, and Robb, with sadness in his eyes and voice, notes that Benjen came back for the king, and so they will see Jon again as well. Robb then fords through the stream and comes back and leads Bran's horse across as well. That'll get us into page 402. As Robb led him across, he felt whole again. He felt like he could climb the trees. Again, he's in this water. It doesn't feel like he's being, dragged or somebody is, holding him up because he can't walk. He almost feels upright in the water because the water is kind of like up to his waist. So that's something that's kind of nice, I guess, for Bran. But as they finish crossing to the other side, they hear summer howling joined by gray winds, and Robb notes they have made a fresh kill. Robb instructs Bran to wait here, and that he will go bring them back. Bran wants to go with him, but Robb says he will be faster alone. And again, if I was in Bran's position, this is exactly what I would hate. Feeling like a burden, slowing down Robb, being this person that has to be lugged around and has no real use. This is exactly what Bran has kind of been thinking and or talking about the entire chapter. And so it's just kind of a nice little payoff to that internal struggle for Bran. And as soon as he was gone, Bran felt like the trees had closed in on him. And I really kind of noted this down. It feels like, I don't know if any of you guys can relate to this. When you're younger, maybe you're in the grocery store and all of a sudden you just lose sight of your parents or your grandparents, whoever you're with. And all of a sudden you feel lost. You feel like the store is so much bigger now than it actually is. And you start to panic. That's kind of what Bran does in this moment, especially when you're thinking about it. It's a big forest and he's 8. But he could not feel his legs, but the chest straps were chafing him, and the snow was melting through his clothes. He wondered what was taking them so long to reach him. Again, he is kind of waiting for the guards, Lou and Theon, to catch up, but they are taking a while. And at this moment, he hears the rustling of leaves. Bran whirls his horse around, expecting to see his friends and the guard. Saw ragged men who were strangers. He nervously says good day to them, but instantly he notes they are no farmers or foresters. Bran starts to think about how richly dressed he is. Everything he is wearing is new and lined with fur. The biggest one says to Bran, all alone in the Wolf's Wood and lost. Because that's what it kind of looks like. If you just randomly approached Bran and you see, okay, it's this young kid, all alone. Why would he be left alone? He's clearly lost. Bran says he was not lost, and he did not like the look of them, as he counts 4 of them in front, and behind him 2 more, which gets us into page 403. Bran notes that his brother just went off, and his guard will be arriving soon. The man notes, and what will they be guarding? And notes Bran's pin. Suddenly, Bran hears a woman's voice, noting how pretty Bran's pin is. The woman was tall and lean and had the same kind of look, with her hair hidden under a helm, with a long spear with a steel tip. The big man then says, let's have a look. Bran watched him anxiously and noticed how awful his clothes were and how worn, but he also puts together that some of these men are deserters from the Wall with the black clothing. So now you start to put some things together, like, okay, so we have some deserters. Now, deserters, as Bran's going to note here in the next little sentence or two, are very dangerous because you understand that they've committed a crime that if they're caught, they will die. So they will do anything to survive. Now, you also look at the state of these people. It looks like haven't gotten good clothing. They haven't even been able to change their clothing to get out of the Night's Watch clothing, which would identify them to anyone. They don't really look like they're well fed, well armed. If you're Bran and you're this really rich kid, if they were to just basically take everything Bran has right now and sell it, they'd be in a really good position. And that's something I think that's going through Bran's mind right now. And again, Bran is taken back to when his father executed Garrett. Ned had told him that a deserter was a dangerous man because they would not shy away from any crime as their life was already forfeit. The big man again asks for the pin, and another woman with blonde hair says they will take the horse too, but Bran says, no, I can't. The big man grabs the reins before Bran could gallop off and says, you will if you know what is good for you. Again, these people have never seen this elaborate saddle. There's no way anyone would know that Bran is a cripple, because think about it, even Lewin didn't know how these saddles worked. Tyrion is the one that had to point that out to them for this to even happen. So it does look really weird, given I wouldn't even say the average person in Westeros. This is kind of like your below average and a wildling. They really wouldn't know what this is. We learn that the man's name is Stiv, as the tall woman notes, look how he is strapped. Stiv gets out his dagger to deal with the straps, and the shorter woman asks if he is some kind of cripple. And at this point, Bran has had enough of being bullied around, of basically being treated like a sack of potatoes that can be lugged around, and says that he is Brandon Stark of Winterfell, and you better let go of my horse, or he will see them all dead. And that gets us into page 404. One of the men laughs and says, he is a Stark. Only one of them would be stupid enough to threaten where other men would beg. The shorter woman says to cut his cock off and feed it to him, but the taller woman seems like she's the one that has some common sense. This is Osha, by the way. Are you dumb? Think about how much Mance would pay for him. Think about even ransoming him. If you're coming from, again, from the wildlings point of view, where it's you're not tied down to being killed because of deserting the Night's Watch. Think about how much you could make off of taking him captive and then selling him back. That's something that could be really interesting as well. And this also confirms that they're wildlings. You might have had some suspicions, but this is the point where we know that they are wildlings. At least some of them anyway. The big man then says, Mance be damned. Do you want to go back there, Osha? The White Walkers will not care. And at this, he slashes the strap, leaving Bran with a cut, which is bleeding. Bran cannot feel it, but it was there all the same. Now, again, I want to point to a couple things now. We've already talked about the desperation of this group, where their condition at this point. But now you also have this idea of the White Walkers. How severe the issue is getting in the far north, that all these people would want to flee south, and they want to do it by the fastest route possible. They're willing to go right past Winterfell to get south quickly. But at this moment, Robb appears. This image, by the way, in the background is really odd looking, but this is what's going on in the book, so we're gonna go roll with it. But yeah, it's an odd one. Don't look too closely at it, I guess. But continuing on, we have Robb appearing. Robb tells them to put down their steel and they will have a quick death. Bran was glad to see Robb, but he noted Robb's voice was a bit strained, showing how Robb was not fully confident. Remember, Robb is 15 years old. He's never been in an actual battle or any type of real combat where if he lost, he died. So a lot of pressure on Robb at this moment. One of the men says, the brother, and the shorter woman notes, he is a bold one. You mean to fight us, boy? Osha notes how hopeless his situation is. They are 6 against 1. She tells him to get off the horse and drop the sword, and he and Bran will be allowed to go. Again, showing that Osha kind of seems like the only person here with the common sense, but let's continue. At this, Robb whistles, and Grey Wind and Summer emerge from the grass and trees. The shorter woman, Hallie, notes wolves. And Bran pipes up, correcting her, saying dire wolves. Actually, they were only half grown, but bigger than any normal wolf he had ever seen. He had been taught the signs. The wolves had bigger heads and legs than normal wolves, with leaner jaws. They looked terrifying at this moment. Again, they just made a fresh kill, so their mouths are red. It's a pretty fearful sight if you're one of these wildlings or deserters and you look over and you're like, you already don't have the best weaponry, not the best armor. And you look over and you see this abnormal wolf just killed something. And there's 2 of them. It's not just one, it's 2 of them. It's a pretty frightful sight. Also, a really good moment for Bran to like use this against them, put fear into them, give some sort of advantage to Robb as well. But that gets us into page 405. So as we continue, the big man calls them nothing more than dogs, which is a bold thing to say from Steve, or Stiv, and says to take them. Robb yells Winterfell and charges. A man with an axe charges Robb, but Robb hit him with a crushing blow to the face. Again, Robb is mounted. He has a clear advantage over these people, and overall, it's just more skilled than all of these people. After he had killed this man, another man was on Robb. A Grey Wind was on him, knocking him into the stream, and Grey Wind following after, turning the stream to red. Osha was the next to charge Robb with her spear, thrusting a few times, but Robb parrying them aside. But finally, she overextended, lost her balance, and Robb charged her down. On the other front, Hallie, the other woman, was engaged with Summer. Summer went for the calf and bit hard, and continued to hold on to Hallie's calf until Hallie went to, with all of her strength, hit Summer with her knife. And this is interesting because Summer knew it already. Like, Summer had like preemptively, as soon as the knife started coming down, jumped back, let go, waited for her to miss, and then attacked again. So it really shows like there's this connection. Like, was Summer seeing this from Bran's point of view, and Bran is saying, you know, Summer, move out of the way and then attack again? Is that there that subconscious connection that Bran isn't even realizing at this point, or was this just Summer's instincts? And a little interesting question there. So Summer pulls back and waits for her to miss, and then pounces and began eating her stomach. A real awful sight to see, especially for Bran, an 8-year-old kid. The last man ran from the stream, but was rowed down from Grey Wind, and Grey Wind knocks him to the ground and bites at his throat. Oh, another kill for the wolves. Getting into page 406. Stiv, at this point, kind of realizes the hopelessness of the situation. They've been taken care of pretty easily. So at this point, he slashes Bran's chest straps, making him fall, but Stiv holds him at dagger point on his throat, like I have in the image in the background, telling Robb to back away or he will kill Bran. Bran notes the other 2 men are dead, and Hallie lays unblinking with Summer, eating her entrails. Robb instantly lowers his sword arm, but is not sure what to do. Osha is still alive, but Grey Wind is coming to finish her off. Stiv tells Robb to call them off or he will kill Bran. Again, what does Robb do in this situation? He's in a really lose-lose situation, and we're kind of just at a stalemate at this point. Robb calls the direwolves back, to which Grey Wind listens, but Summer doesn't. Summer stays exactly where he is, and he was growling, his eyes full of hate, ready to pounce at any moment. Osha finally gets back to her feet using her spear, and Bran notes how the cut on her arm is still bleeding that Robb had given her. Bran also notes how scared Stiv is as well. Like, he can tell. Like, Stiv is kind of shaking a little bit. He seems like he doesn't know what to do. And as he tells Osha to get Robb's sword and to kill the wolves. And Osha is sitting here again, being a very logical person. The wolves are not going to just let me kill them. And so she's like, I'm not going nowhere near them. If you want to kill the wolves, you do it. And for a moment, Stiv is unsure what to do. He asks Robb what his name is. Robb answers saying he is Robb Stark, the heir to Winterfell. Stiv says this is your brother, to which Robb agrees. And still, Stiv tells him to do what he says or Bran dies. Again, kind of going in circles. It's like, this is kind of already the threat. We know that's what you're doing. And Stiv starts by telling him to get off of his horse. Robb hesitates, but slowly gets off with sword in hand. That gets us into page 407. Stiv then tells him to kill the wolves, but Robb did not move. Now, this is an interesting point. Like, at this point, Robb is not like as in tune to Grey Wind as he is later in the story, but telling Robb to kill Grey Wind is basically like telling him to kill part of himself. And Stiv says to do it, the wolves or the boy. And Bran tells him not to. They will kill them after the wolves are dead regardless, which I kind of disagree with Bran. Like, yes, they could, or Stiv could still kill Bran. But in my opinion, Robb could easily take both of these two out. He's already proved that. So, agree to disagree. Stiv then grabs Bran's hair, ripping it a bit, telling him to shut up. And then Bran hears a thrum. Stiv gave a choked gasp as an arrowhead came through his stomach. The dagger fell away from Bran's throat. The big man swayed to the ground, and his life ended there. Osha calls for mercy as their guards approach, and the guards look at the slaughter with wonder, fear, and amazement. Again, it's a weird scene. Like, you have all of these deserters, wildlings all littered on the ground that have been just destroyed by the wolves and Robb. And it's like, oh, let's think about the last time there actually was this kind of an event in the Wolfwood. It must have been a long time. Like think about it from these guards. Like, all of a sudden the dire wolves are coming back. Now there's deserters, wildlings coming this close to Winterfell. It's a really odd sight. And even at this point, Summer returns to go feasting on Holly's corpse and gives the guards a bit of a fright. At this, Lewin eventually comes out of the brush and asks if Bran is hurt. Bran notes that he got a cut at the leg, but he could not feel it. Lewin goes to examining it, and Bran notes Theon, smiling as ever, with his bow and some arrows in the ground ready for more shots. So again, what ends up happening is Theon just shoots Stiv in the back and kind of saves the day. Now, it was risky, and we're going to get in this entire debate here. As Theon remarks, a dead enemy is a thing of beauty. Robb, then obviously frustrated, notes how Jon always said Theon was an ass, and that he should drag him to the yard and let Bran shoot some practice shots at him. And we're going to get into this argument in page 408, but I want to know what you guys think. Do you guys think Theon was in the right to shoot Stiv, or maybe there could have been a better approach to this? Now, for me personally, I'm going to talk about it really in the next page, so I guess I won't give my thoughts here, but I don't know if there was any better options. But let's get into page 408. Theon says that he should be thanking him as he saved Bran's life, which Robb is not happy about. What if you had missed, or only made the man kill Bran, or if the man was wearing a breastplate, what then? And so this is where we get to this point here. The only reason the guard actually didn't make it to where Bran was because of Theon going to hunt a deer. But again, how is Theon supposed to know that Robb was going to leave Bran alone? Robb is the person in charge of Bran for his protection. And again, I get it from Robb's point of view as well, thinking the guard was right behind, but he didn't know that. Like, he didn't know that the guard was, directly behind. And so you come to this point where, when we get to this point where Stiv has the dagger to Bran's throat, what was going to be done? There's nothing Robb could have done. Maybe Robb could have tried to talk him out of it, saying, if you let Bran go, we'll try and work something out. We won't make you a prisoner or anything, or won't kill you. But that wouldn't have really done anything, right? And so I think Theon probably makes the best move that they possibly could have done. And something I want to note here is when Robb yells at Theon about, again, if that he should let Bran shoot some practice shots at him, it is this idea that Robb is treating Theon as lesser, like he is a servant or something that Robb can just use like that. So when we get to later on, when Theon betrays the Starks, this is something that's going to play in Theon's mind. Like, yes, I may be friends with Robb. I might think he's a brother, but he isn't. The Greyjoys are his actual family, are his actual blood. And this is going to be one of those things that's going to play into Theon's mind. Theon's smile at this point is gone, and he gives a shrug. Robb then turns to the guards, and where were you? He was sure they were close behind. Quent, the younger of them, says they were following, but they had to wait for Lewin, like I talked about earlier in the chapter, and they got distracted as Theon notes he had spotted a turkey. And again, Theon pipes up going, how is he supposed to know that Robb would leave Bran alone? Which, again, I think is a fair thought from Theon. Bran notes he had never seen Robb so angry, but he had nothing to say. Again, showing how him and Ned are so similar. This is things they do. They show their anger, but they don't really say it. They kind of hold it in a bit. Robb then kind of lets this go and comes to Bran and asks Lewin how bad he is hurt. Lewin says it's only a scratch, and Robb notes how 2 of the men were deserters and they were fools to come so close to Winterfell. And we have a really great line here from Lewin. I talked about this already in the chatter, so I won't linger too much on it. But Lewin argues that folly and desperation are hard to tell apart. Again, these people were very desperate. They didn't seem like they had a lot of food. They were, again, wearing very worn clothes. They were trying to escape the White Walkers, get far south as possible. I really like this line from Lewin, and I think this is some great writing from George at this point. Quent asks if they should bury them, and Robb says no, they would not have buried them, and that they will send their heads to the wall, and the crows can have the rest of them. Quent then asks what is to be done with Osha, who is still alive. And that gets into the last page of the chapter, page 409. Although Osha was a head taller than Robb, she sinks to her knees, pleading for her life, and that she will be his, basically, servant. Robb questions what he could use with an oathbreaker, which is, again, kind of weird to say. Like, Robb should know she's, like, not part of the Night's Watch. She hasn't broken any oaths, really. She has attacked the Starks. So possibly he could be going from, oh, okay, you're probably from some northern, lord, and then you're breaking your oath attacking a Stark. Maybe that's what he's looking at. But even then, Ocean notes that she had broken no oaths. The other 2 men had been crows, but the watch takes no woman. Theon urges to give her to the wolves, which makes Robb feel very uncomfortable. Again, Robb is someone that doesn't want to kill a woman, especially in the brutal fashion of the wolves. No one should really die like that. And I think that's kind of what Robb is thinking about. Also, Robb has never had to condemn someone to die yet. It's different in the heat of battle when you're fighting to protect your brother. Now it's Osha who's basically unarmed at this point. She's a prisoner. Now Robb would have to kill her without her fighting back. That's a whole different story. But at this moment, Bran pipes up that she is a wildling, as she had been talking about Mance. And this is when Lewin is going to come in to save the day. He's going to get basically Robb out of this position, saying that they could use her for questioning purposes. And Robb seems relieved, because at least now he will not have to kill her. And agrees, and has Osha bound and says she will live or die off the truths that she gives them. And that is the end of the chapter. A really, different switch up of the pace of Bran chapters, where a lot of the times with Bran's chapters, it's a lot of us seeing other characters, and especially for Robb. Robb is kind of like, as we'll see later on with Catelyn kind of being the main POV into Robb's head. Early on, it's Bran being that for Robb. Robb is one of those characters that's like, he doesn't have a POV, but he always has a POV character next to him. So we kind of know what's going on with him and his camp. It's kind of like Davos with Stannis. And so in this chapter, Bran is a focal point of the chapter. He's not just kind of sitting back watching other people do things. There's a little bit of that, of course, with like Robb and the wolves, but I think this is probably Bran's best chapter. I've been rating all the chapters, giving every chapter a rating out of 10. Bran has the lowest average rating of all of the POVs that we have so far. And this is definitely, one of the better ones. I don't think it's like a top 15 chapter maybe in the story so far. But it's definitely like, you know, average, above average territory, much better for like a Bran chapter. So thank you guys all for watching. And I will see you guys all in next week's video. I believe next week's video is the Ned chapter picking up after his injury, so that should always be a good time. It's either that or Tyrion. I think it's that. Okay, I actually think it might be Tyrion. So we might be getting Tyrion being in a prisoner at the Vale. So thank you guys all for watching, and see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.